We need to just live with it and get on with life, because what we're doing right now is not living.
Now, when I saw your first LinkedIn statement the other day, Eve, my goodness, I'm so happy. I could sing, we finally have a plan, in caps. But I get the impression you're not feeling so elated.
Then I dived into the detail, or lack thereof,
Right.
and decided I wasn't actually so excited at all. Yeah, unfortunately, when you dive into it, the 7-day isolation was still in place. So visitors just aren't going to come to businesses aren't going to bring people here for events, and people are not going to travel here with 7 days of isolation. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't matter how we package it up, it will make it far too expensive and far too time consuming. So that was a big negative. The dates were a plus. At least they've got some framework now that we can try and plan towards, because I suspect that the isolation won't be in place when we get to April. But then also the other negative, of course, was that they're going to allow Kiwis to travel overseas as long as they come back via Australia. I think they have to do something like 14 days in Australia. So not only have we lost our international market for summer, we've now also effectively exported our only market that we can target overseas.
Yeah, you mentioned that. You know, you've effectively you've exported your domestic market abroad.
Yeah.
For the first quarter of next year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I guess is your busiest.
Oh, between October, yeah, roughly early October to the end of March, possibly pushing into April, would be our busiest period. And we were hopeful that Australians would be able to travel in January at least. I mean, to me, what's the difference between allowing a Kiwi passport holder to come in from Australia and an Australian passport holder? There's no difference. If they're double vaccinated and they provide a negative test prior to travel, what's the difference? The only difference is they hold a different passport. There's no difference in the risk.
No, and the bit, what I was confused about, or what struck me as odd, is that you've got your dates, which is great, fantastic. At least that's a start. However, I mean, just on a human level, no Kiwis are allowed home before Christmas. Now that to me struck me as just being, I couldn't see the logic in that. And then the next step, you've got this situation where there's no real international business travel until April.
Yeah.
Which wipes it. It means you're going to have the worst season.
Oh, we are now facing possibly the most difficult 6 months we've faced since the pandemic began, purely for that reason. And you're right. I mean, why wait until January? The apparent risk was around COVID spread, obviously, but when you look at the statistics, 0.7% of people coming through MIQ have had COVID. I think we've got more cases in the community now than we've ever had through MIQ in the whole time it's been running, in 21 months.
I mean, that was Adam's big gripe.
Yeah.
You know, what is the point of having a quarantine system that actually means there's more risk for people coming into New Zealand catching COVID than them giving it to anybody else? It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense, but of course, as with everything they've done up to this point, the narrative used, we knew it wasn't going to be a great announcement because A, they didn't make a meal of it, and B, it came with the 1 p.m. COVID update. So you know it's never going to be anything significant when it comes out in the same update as the COVID case numbers. But I think one thing's evident from reading into the detail is that, use the word lightly, for April, even that leaves it wide open for Australians to potentially travel to New Zealand prior to that April deadline, and B, it leaves it open for changes between now and then because they don't really set anything in stone. So it says somewhere in the framework eligible travellers. We don't know what eligible travellers are. We don't know what that means. Is that double vaxxed Kiwi passport holders, or is that double vaxxed anyone? What countries are they going to start with? They've talked about low, medium, high risk, but they still haven't told us what low, medium, high risk is.
Yeah, very, very, very strange. What about this this traffic light system?
I mean, it's confusing for a start. It's not so much the system that's confusing, but the COVID protection framework that they've put in place around it. And we literally had a meeting about this afternoon to go over the framework, which puts in different guidelines for different types of businesses, events, hospitality, hotels. But of course, they pool all hospitality businesses in together, regardless of whether or not you have outdoor space or indoor space or how big or small you are. They pool all accommodations in together, hotels, hostels, smaller apartments. Although one change they did make, which was awesome off the back of a meeting that Biata Group and I had with MB, is that they changed mask wearing guidelines in hostels, because it's just not practical to ask those people to wear masks in environments where you can't really social distance. It's just too hard. And also, who's supposed to mandate that? Are we supposed to employ a staff member to encourage those individuals to wear masks? Are we going to be in trouble if we don't encourage them to wear masks? So I think what's become evident from those meetings is that we just have to ensure that we're doing the best we can to encourage people. And if they choose not to, it's on the individual. That's what we've gathered from the meetings. But the whole system itself, I don't even know. I don't watch the updates anymore because they just frustrate me. So they did an announcement today around which areas of the country are going to red, orange or green. So none are going to green, despite the fact that half of the South Island have not had COVID for God knows how many days. I think Auckland's going to red. I think we're in red as well in Northland because of our vax rates. But then there'll be certain areas in orange. And what does that mean for crossing boundaries between the two? Yes, very confusing.
So red, I mean, is the that's the highest level, is it?
Red is the first step, yeah. So the highest risk level, and then it goes down to orange and then down to green, where green is no restrictions.
Okay, that's something else I don't understand, because after speaking with Adam, he pointed out that Auckland is something like, in terms of eligible population, 90% vaccinated.
So Auckland are nearly 95% one jabbed.
Wow.
So that's a massive, massive statistic. And when you look at prior 1 p.m. updates for COVID, the narrative was always, we need to get to this figure. Once we're there, we can ease all the restrictions. But that's not what's happened. So now we're coming into territory where people are starting to obviously rebel and revolt against restrictions because they've been vaccinated. Some of us have been vaccinated for months and we've had no benefit whatsoever.
So why, but what I don't understand is, if Auckland is the most vaccinated and therefore safest region, why is it the region at highest risk?
It's the most heavily populated region, and with 4,500 COVID cases in the community, and potentially they could be concerned about home ISO. So obviously there's lots of people at home with COVID at the moment, home isolating. But that system has been a little bit of a shambles too, because there's been anonymous reports to media here that people that are in isolation with COVID are not being treated particularly well. They're not being told when they can be released from home ISO, and potentially they might be worried about people just going about their normal business. I really don't know. I couldn't tell you, but there's no reason to me why Auckland needs to be in red, because like you say, the vaccination rates are ridiculously high. We've got some of the highest vaccination rates in Auckland than globally.
Weird, yeah. It does sound like you are getting some traction in terms of getting the ear of people in government compared to, say, where you were a month ago.
Yeah, I think we are. we still have to be very careful of the narrative. So we were having a discussion about this hostel advocacy today, and we're trying to steer well clear of financial support discussions because we know it isn't going to happen. Doesn't matter how much effort we put into that, it's not going to happen. So we know TIA are going to continue to advocate for that. So we'll just leave that with them, and we're just going to focus on, well, at the moment, hostel and allowing working holiday visas and student visa holders to return at the same time as Kiwi passport holders from the rest of the world outside Australia, which I think is February 13th. So we're focusing purely on trying to pull those visa holders forward into February to give us a chance, A, to get workers for the next season, and B, to have some semblance of a summer.
Right. Okay. I mean, on the youth hostel thing, what's the news about that? I mean, you've had some closures, haven't you?
Oh, there's lots of closures. So the most recent casualty, unfortunately, is 11 YHA hostels around New Zealand. They've been in operation for 90 years in New Zealand, so it's not like they're, failures as businesses. And it's a huge blow to the industry. 2,000 beds, and not only that, on top of the YHA, there's been a lot more as well that have gone under, and they won't be back for good. So we've lost 53% of the industry so far for hostels.
Lost you there. Sorry. Just turned it off. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So you've lost a load of Youth Hostel Association properties.
Yeah, so 11 of those, 3 of which were brand new, only just started operating a couple of years ago. And we've lost a load of smaller operations. So we've lost 53% of our beds overall. So we've gone from around 31,000 down to 13,000 beds across New Zealand. And we need that accommodation because the backpacker mindset person, that youth traveller, doesn't, they're coming here for a long period of time. They're not going to stay in 5-star hotels and swan about the city in fur. Like they want to experience the country. And the other shame is that a lot of these hostels are some of the greenest businesses in the country, because the youth traveller now is much more mindful of the environment. So therefore, the hostels have to be too. So it's just a huge blow.
Well, it is a huge blow, because the other thing about New Zealand is that it was on every backpacker's bucket list, if you want to call it. It was a desired destination, and
it still is.
And it's yeah, absolutely, that goes without saying. But if your government is actually poisoning that particular, because that's what it boils down to, the death of a certain part of your culture, because it is a culture.
Yeah.
There's the legacy issue. 20 years ago I went to New Zealand or whatever, but there's also, as you say, they are a significant or a useful proportion of the workforce.
Yeah. 100%.
No encouragement for them to come over at all.
No, and this is the problem. So I'm on the board for BIATA, obviously, which is the Backpacker and Youth Adventure Travel Association. We've done, one of our members, Henry Matthews, and a couple of the other team have done an amazing job putting together a presentation that's called the Lifetime Value Model. And it is all around the backpacker who comes here to work for 3 to 6 months. They'll go away again. They'll possibly come back with a family later in life to live here because it's such a nice place to be. Their family will come and visit them, and their kids will grow up, and the cycle starts again. So it really is a valuable piece, and not just for tourism, but for New Zealand as a whole, and for the education industry too.
So in between all of that, then, you're talking about the Youth Hostel Association, you're talking about visitors coming over. Somewhere in all of that, you've got destination management, corporate destination management, business events. I mean, that's not even, that doesn't sound like you're getting a look in.
No, well, I don't think they are. I really think the event sector has been a little bit forgotten through this whole process, much like travel agents have, really. So tourism businesses have made a big fuss, and we've shouted relatively loud. But of course, the tourism and travel as a whole is such a massive sector. So you've got tourism businesses, hospo could be pulled into that, accommodations, events, of course. And it's just, I think there's a couple of sectors within there that have been wildly overlooked, and sadly events is one of those.
Right, okay. Have you heard of an outfit called Angus and Associates?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I just saw on LinkedIn today an ongoing survey they're running, Visitor Insights Program. So it looks like you're familiar with it.
Yeah, I read it this morning.
Right, okay. So it's saying that since since all of this has been going on, you're in a situation now where 71% of according to this survey, 71% of New Zealanders think that you should be starting to open up your borders now.
Yeah.
Either, I mean, there's a small percentage that go and just open it up, but most of them are saying, no, let's do it in a measured way. But let's do it now.
Yeah, and that's what we want, really. I think there's this common misconception among those who don't work in tourism, events, or hospo or travel, that we just want the borders flung open. We don't. We would like it to be done in a measured and considered way, with testing and other measures in place to ensure that we're doing the best we can from a risk perspective. But yeah, why are we waiting until January? Why can't we allow families to be reunited for Christmas? I just find it crazy. And you're right, 70 to 71% of people said they wanted measured opening. But unfortunately, what's happening at the moment is the government are not listening to external polling. They're only listening to their internal polling of their own party. So 74% of their internal poll base says that they want the borders kept shut.
All government polls are always biased towards the government.
Of course.
That's the same in the UK.
But that's what they want.
Yeah, they get told what they want to hear.
Yeah.
So really, we've got a situation here where you've got 71% of the population, not just people in events or tourism, want the borders open now, in some way, shape, or form. Yet it's happening, but it's happening very slowly.
Incredibly slowly, far too slowly. And you could argue that we've probably got to grips with this Delta outbreak now. We've pretty much plateaued in terms of cases. But I mean, waiting until January to allow Kiwi passport holders, vaccinated Kiwi passport holders, to return from Australia, I just find it very strange, when they could have done it before Christmas. And there's no difference to me between a Kiwi passport holder in Australia and a Kiwi passport holder in Europe, albeit maybe there's slightly more risk with Europe because of the number of people and the number of cases they've got over there. But at least allow people from Australia to travel. Like, my mum was supposed to be coming in January, and I'm gutted she's not going to be able to come.
But once again, you know, I mean, and that's just your story. But once again, if you've been vaccinated or you've tested negative, and you're coming in to a country where there is an exponential growth in COVID cases, what's the problem? Why can't they come in now? You know,
I know.
It seems to be almost spiteful not to let people come home before Christmas. It really is a strange thing that's going on there. The other thing I wanted to ask you about all of this, Eve, is obviously everyone's talking about these vaccine passports and all the rest of it. Is there any indication that they are going to be temporary? Has there been any talk about, okay, once we're here, we're going to drop them?
No, there's been no talk of that whatsoever. And it doesn't seem to be something they'd consider, to be honest, in my view at the moment.
So it's not even a topic of discussion.
No.
Right. Because I mean, one of the necessary issues that that has stopped everybody from doing business are the restrictions which have been required. But as we're coming out of this and moving into recovery, surely there should be an understanding that the restrictions that are staying in, the restrictions that are stopping people living their lives and doing business, we accept those on the basis that they're going to be temporary.
You would think, but there's been no discussion on the temporary measures at all. All we've heard at the moment is this is how it is. CVCs have been pretty much mandated here now. And I think I heard last week that if businesses are seen to be not adhering to the CVC mandates, they'll be fined $15,000.
Crikey. Okay.
Yeah, so there doesn't seem to be a narrative around all these restrictions being temporary. I know that there's restrictions, the temporary restrictions are around numbers and how many people you can have. They're temporary because they're obviously dependent on red, orange, green traffic light system. But in terms of the vaccine mandates and boosters and CVCs and having to have one in order to go to a restaurant or a bar doesn't seem to be temporary, seems to be very much permanent to me.
Your vaccination rates now for the overall population, which is something that Adam pointed out, last week we're at 69%.
Yeah.
For the whole of the population of New Zealand.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that compares with Australia, which was 71% this time last week.
I think we're 71 now, today, as of today.
Well, there you go. Okay. I think the UK, I don't know what the UK is, but I think that's less. And certainly America is a lot less. So you're now on comparable terms in terms of the proportion of your population that's now vaccinated. Yes.
But I think how this government will view it is, we're at comparable rates to the UK and the US, but look what's happening over there. Cases are still running rampant, but of course they're not comparable because we have a population of 4.8 million in a country the same size as the UK, which has 14 times more people. I think they're just touching on 70 million. So it's not really a comparable environment here, but the problem is we're doing all of our modelling based off what's happening in Europe. So all of our wildly over-exaggerated modelling that suggests we're going to have between 70 and 80,000 cases if we just fling the borders open, that would be a higher percentage than any other country has experienced. So I think the modelling needs to be questioned heavily. But you're right, I mean, our vaccination rates are high, and the WHO recommended 70% population to be the benchmark of, okay, you're pretty safe now to be opening up, you've protected the majority of your population. And let's face it, there's always going to be a percentage of people that are not going to want to be vaccinated. And there's nothing we can do about that. People fall into two categories: convincible or unconvincible. And if they're not convincible, just let them get on with it. It's the people in the middle that I feel for, the ones that wanted to just wait for more research and more data, because it typically takes a few years to get good data on a vaccine or medical treatment. And they've not been afforded that luxury. They've been forced to have it. Even personally speaking, I wouldn't have had it unless if my family were here and I didn't have to go anywhere, I probably would have chosen to wait. Only because I'm allergic to so many different medications, and I actually had quite a bad adverse reaction to the vaccine. So having a booster isn't filling me with joy, but there's this whole group of people that just simply wanted to have information to make an informed decision for themselves, and they haven't been able to do that. And it's a shame. But as for the others that just don't want to, there's nothing we can do about those. We need to start opening up safely with measures in place, which you can argue we're kind of doing with the Auckland border opening on the 15th of December. But in terms of travel, I mean, what is the harm? Why can't we allow working holiday visa holders and student visa holders into the country? They're the kind of people that don't mind doing 7 days isolation or finding a location to do that. It's not a problem for them because they're coming here for a few months. So,
well, they're young, and they're not at risk as much as older people. And you know, if you're worried about importing, you can't be worried about importing something where you've got 4,500 people already.
No, exactly.
You could always do, Eve, what Austria has done. You would have thought they'd have learned their lesson.
Austria are the ones that have basically said you will be vaccinated, and if you're not going to be vaccinated, you can leave Austria. They've done that, haven't they?
Well, they've said that you will be vaccinated, and if you don't, you'll get fined or you can end up in prison.
That just blows my mind. That's a whole new level of breaching human rights.
Well, they tried it in 1936. It didn't work too well then, did it? So do you think that would happen in New Zealand? Do you think people would accept that?
No way. There's widespread frustration now over the mandates. Even people that are vaccinated are not happy because it doesn't allow for pro-choice. And if that happened here, there would be absolute riots, I expect.
Okay. One other thing, Eve. What's it called? Omicron. Transformer. What is it? It sounds like a Transformers sort of the baddie. It
does.
Omicron.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely sounds like a Transformer, but it's already proving to not be as deadly as Delta. So the more the media push that aspect, the less fear there will be. So at the moment, I don't think it's fear. I think people are looking at things like this and they're going, are you kidding me? Like, this is insane. Like, it's not going to stop. COVID is going to be around for a really long time. Let's just start using rapid antigen testing, lateral flow testing. People are carrying them around in their handbags in Europe to go to meetings, for goodness sake. We haven't even rolled them out here. It's insane. We need to get to grips with all of this medical tech, start using it, and use that as our measures against COVID, because it's not going away. And quite frankly, I don't care about Omicron or whatever the hell it's called. It's just another variant, much like, this is a very controversial thing to say because I know COVID is not like flu, but flu has loads of different strains. This is going to be no different. It's just going to be more severe adverse effects for people. And we need to just live with it and get on with life, because what we're doing right now is not living.